Good morning, members. It is the scheduled time and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Bills Committee on Promotion of Recycling and Proper Disposal of Products, Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2025. Item 1, meeting with the administration. We welcome the team from the government. A brief introduction of the officials today. Ms. Amy Wong, Acting Principal Assistant Secretary for Environment and Ecology. Mr. Kenneth Zhang, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, responsible for waste reduction. Mr. Steve Wong, Assistant Director of the EPD. Mr. David Lyde, Principal Environmental Protection Officer. Ms. Selina Lau, Senior Assistant Law Draftsman from the DOJ, and Ms. Janice Leung, Government Counsel from the DOJ. First of all, a very warm welcome to the administration. Please walk us through the bill. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Bills Committee. The government has always been promoting waste reduction and inculcating a culture of waste reduction and recycling in society. Now, the daily disposal volume of municipal solid waste since 2021 has been reducing for 3 consecutive years because of our work. Now, through a multi-pronged approach and various policy measures, we will continue to ride on this good trend. Now, producers' responsibility schemes, or PRS, are important tools for encouraging recycling. Through the principles of polluters pay and eco-responsibility, PRS require the relevant stakeholders to share responsibility in recycling, upcycling, and collecting and treating end-of-life products to reduce their impact on the environment and also promote the enhancement of quality and volume in terms of recycling. Now, PRS help develop the circular economy by creating job opportunities and business for recyclers. It will also stimulate innovation and use of technologies in waste management. Now, for the new PRS, they will be implemented through a market-led approach. In the long run, they will become a new growth point for our economy. Various local recycling facilities are going to be commissioned soon. That's why we now propose to establish a common law legislative framework for the PRS. It is an opportune time to do so because in the future we will be able to roll out the PRS with a more effective manner. Now, in November 2023 and March this year, the government has established a common legislative framework. Has consulted the Advisory Council on the Environment concerning the common legislative framework. The Council supported our proposal. Now, we have gazetted the bill this year and also introduced the bill to the Legislative earlier this year. Now, this is the Promotion of Recycling and Proper Disposal of Products, Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2025. The purposes are: 1. Amend Cap 603, the apparel, and establish a common legislative framework for the progressive introduction of producer responsibility schemes applicable to different products, so that various products can be subsumed under the PRS progressively. 2. Amending Cap 354 Waste Disposal Ordinance and the subsidiary legislations to introduce a permits and licensing regime for certain waste products, and also establish an export and import regulatory regime for certain products. 3. Proposing some technical amendments to the plastic shopping bag charging schemes to introduce digital payment methods, including FPS. Now, in view of the current economic environment, we are concerned about the potential impacts on the trade from the PRS. So in formulating the various PRS for various products, we will continue to engage the stakeholders and understand from them the concerns and seek to reduce the compliance costs of the trade. We will also provide for a transitional period so that the stakeholders can become adept to the scheme's details. Now, the major purpose of this bill is to establish a common legislative framework so that in formulating the various PRS for specific products, we can continue to discuss the details of the trade and consider the impacts on the environment. Now, when the trade is ready and when we have consulted the Legislative Council, only then will we introduce the PRS for negative vetting by the Council. Me and my team will be happy to take questions. Thank you. Thank you. Now, members who would like to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. Now, you may ask questions on the policy matters of the bill. Now, concerning the letter sent by the legal advisor on the 17th of April, concerning some matters on the bill, the administration has given a reply. Now, when we are at the clause-by-clause scrutiny, we will discuss those replies. The members who have pressed the button are Dr. Dick Chi Yun, Mr. Chen Shih-Fung, Ms. Carmen Khan, and Mr. Peter Shiu. Dr. Dick, 5 minutes. Questions and answers include. Thank you. Now, the principle of polluters pay, we all subscribe to it. We all want our environment to become better. Now, the common legislative framework provides a framework for various producer responsibility schemes to develop, but I'm somewhat worried. The ultimate goal is to reduce the volume of waste in the landfill by recycling the waste products along the stream. Now, I wonder if the government has a clear plan to achieve that goal. First, we need to develop the recycling market. Now, under the common legislative framework, producers need to come up with PRS plans to recycle their products. Now, the downstream sector of the market is not mature. For plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons and so on, even if there is a regime for the producers to recycle their products, if there is not a mature downstream market to upcycle or recycle the waste, they will end up in the landfill anyway. So how ready is the chain? Now, when producers fail to comply with the targets, they need to pay a fee or levy. Some producers may simply shift the additional cost to the consumers. They wouldn't find it a big issue. So despite the PRS, in the end, it may be the consumers who are made responsible for the waste. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Member. Now, concerning the readiness of our downstream actors, before each PRS is rolled out, we will carefully assess the readiness of the trade. On plastic bottles for beverage and beverage cartons, we have already conducted a vigorous research. Now, plastic beverage containers or plastic bottles are hot items for recycling because they are valuable. Now, when market force is at play, the downstream players will have sufficient capacity to recycle the collected plastic bottles. So we are not worried. Now, for beverage cartons, the capacity is limited at present. Now, the amount collected is not significant. However, by the end of this year, at the Eco Park, there will be a paper pulp facility commissioned. After its commissioning, it will have sufficient capacity to recycle the collected paper waste and beverage cartons. So that is not a cause for concern. Now, another waste product, EV batteries. There's also a recycling facilities for EV batteries being built in the Eco Park. Upon its commissioning, our capacity for recycling EV batteries will be greatly enhanced. So that was a great question raised by the member. Before we roll out each PRS, we will carefully consider the recycling capacity downstream. Whether the manufacturers will shift the additional cost to consumers. That is the reason why we need to carefully discuss the matter with the trade. They are concerned about the compliance cost. So we will adjust each segment carefully and provide for a sufficiently long transitional period to keep the compliance costs down. We don't want to add to the burden of the trade, but rather implementing the PRS with maximum efficiency. Some follow-up questions. Now, the examples you mentioned, plastic bottles, you said they are hot items for recyclers. So does the government have a strategy to harness the market's force? Now, we always say that we want the government to step in to speed up the developments of the downstream sectors. So does the government have a strategy for that? Can the administration give us a brief answer? Now, the PRS for plastic bottle, we have done a lot of preparatory work. For example, the reverse vending machine. There are some 120 reverse vending machines in Hong Kong. So we are progressively creating an atmosphere for recycling plastic bottles. And also the collection points as the green at community. We have been increasing the number of these collection points with a view to building a recycling culture. So we have been paving the way for various PRS. Mr. Chen Xihong, thank you. I support the PRS because under the principles of polluters pay and a market-led approach, we are asking the producers to share the responsibility in recycling. Now, with a common legislative framework, the government can implement the PRS for various products efficiently by way of subsidiary legislation. It will also encourage the sustainable development of the recycling trade. So I support the general direction of the policy. And also the various PRS have been effective. With this common legislative framework, we can include more products under the scope by way of putting them in the schedule. Now, concerning plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, while implementing the PRS for these two products, the government is also seeking some legislative amendments. Now, some concerned groups think that by setting the targets for the two products at 35% and 10%, Well, it seems that the major producer of these products have already achieved a recycling rate of 30%. So the concerned groups think that the targets are not aggressive enough. So can the government explain to us how this works? Now, if there is no pushback initially, the government will continue to progress with the PRS. So can the government tell us your plans? Now, in terms of plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, the producers will have to bear the responsibility, but the cost may be shifted to the consumers. But under the market-led approach, consumers play an important role in the effort as well. Consumers are willing to pay an additional 10 cents or 20 cents for the beverage, so it may not be helpful to nurture an eco-friendly culture. Now, when I was in my childhood, we could return the glass bottle and get the down payment for the bottle back. So can we consider this arrangement, because it will have a more direct impact on the consumers? That's my two questions.
Deputy Director. Thank you, Chairman. Well, on the plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, we suggest that there should be different phases in recycling. We did suggest this before. We are now in discussion with the sector. The sector wants to see a more sustainable, or at least a steady recycling scheme in the beginning. And so we're talking about have a stronger recovery rate. So in the beginning, we thought it would be 10%, but now up to 30%, it's already higher than expected. And for the beverage cartons, it's we expected 1%, but we have reached 10%, and so it's a great leap for us. We in the sector believe that we should be or stay steady in the beginning, and then to gradually push this forward to up to 75% and 50% recovery rate respectively. We believe that by increasing this gradually, it would be more suitable for Hong Kong. Well, for the sort of deposit for the glass containers or glass bottles, we believe that we need to change the habits of the consumers. We have been trying to build up consumers' habits, and we are starting to see results. We have seen results in a reduction in landfills. Therefore, for the plastic containers and beverage cartons, we have suggested a 10-cent rebate. So, but of course, you might ask whether this amount is attractive enough. We need to strike a balance. Otherwise, it's still cost on the side of the consumer. If the cost becomes too high, then the recovery suppliers may not want to bear this financial burden, and they would bring an impact on the recycling business. The 10-cent rebate has its attractiveness. By adopting this method, hope to see gradual success. By that time, consumers may have well built up this habit, and we believe that this is a way forward for all of us. Well, Chairman, I do agree that we should take this step by step. When you try to use radical means to make consumers recycle, then it might have a negative impact. And so in the beginning, when we roll out the PRS, we should try to take this step by step and then to gradually make changes to enhance it, such as increasing the 10-cent debate to another amount. And I believe that you should come back with enhancements later on when you see some successes. Ms. Carmen Ken, thank you. I'd like to declare that I do have relative working in recycling. I believe that a PPT introduction would help us understand the bill more clearly. Well, since we are talking about taking this step by step, I would like to review what we have been doing so far, such as the charges for solid municipal waste. We actually have in the Legislative and the panel on environment discussed this briefly before. In January 2023, on the PRS, we said that by May 1st of that year, there would be a PRS on glass containers. So that was a government-led approach. But this time, we're talking about a market-led approach, and this has been discussed at our panel quite a few times. We support this PRS, but then I do have a question. Now that we are shifting to the market-led approach, what are some of the benefits we will see, as this is actually a change in policy? And I'm sure that you have gone through thorough consideration and believe that this would be much better than a government-led approach. At that time, we already talked about the regulation on plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons. And looking back at the papers, we talked about 10-cent rebate regulating the recyclers. The only difference was that at that time, we wanted the for retailers, for a shop of over 200 square feet, then they would need to provide recycling points. But now a change has been made that now a shop of over 400 square feet would need to provide that. In para 7 of the paper, we wanted a discussion, or at least changes to be made by July of that year. But now we are in 2025. The municipal solid waste fee or charge has been shelved. So it doesn't seem that we have made much progress. It seems that the process has been delayed. I understand that we need to strike a balance. We are talking about rebating consumers, and consumers feel that there is an incentive to recycle containers. So for the glass containers, it seems that they would provide a rebate. And now you want the suppliers to provide the incentive to the consumers. a market-led approach. So I do want to hear more about the difference between a government-led approach and a market-led approach. Now that the incentive has been given to the consumers, I don't want you to transfer or shift the cost over to the consumers, because you would have to deliver it to the downstream and then offer a rebate to the consumers. So what can be improved here? I think I would ask these few questions first and ask a second round later on. Deputy Director. Well, yes, we now are looking at a PRS. The glass containers, we're talking about a government-led approach. And for the electrical appliances, also a government-led approach. So suppliers distribute the products, and then the government would help recycle the products. Well, I can say that it's quite effective at the moment, but very often a charge once set by the government would sort of be a statutory charge, and there may be cost transferred to others. We try our best to set a reasonable charge. A market-led approach would be different in that a best method or the best format would be adopted to bring out the highest efficiency and effectiveness. And the sector would also be able to participate more. When we adopt a government-led approach, only a few suppliers would be able to participate. But then once we open up to be a market-led approach, then there could be other participants in the market. The effectiveness and the speed in development could then be greatly enhanced. However, more considerations would need to be taken, as there would be more suppliers and more recycling partners, and as there are more stakeholders, we must then spend more time to develop a better scheme. We have all along been in close communication with the stakeholders. We are meeting them on a frequent basis. There are a lot of details we need to iron out. Therefore, we are taking a prudent approach to spend more time to prepare everything before we adopt this change. Mr. Chiu Ka-fai. Thank you, Chairman. Well, other than the method in recycling beverage containers and beverage cartons, how about for vehicle tires and EV batteries? Do we need to discuss this time? No, we're only talking about the common legislative framework for at the moment. Well, once this comes into effect, would we then discuss the recycling methods of EV batteries and tires? So we are only talking about containers today. All right. Well, since we are on the topic of beverage containers and beverage cartons, on the labeling, would there actually be a individual QR code for these recyclable containers and cartons?
Director, please. Thank you. Concerning the PRS for plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, upon discussion with the trade, we propose to add an identification code on the products to show that the product has been registered under the PRS. Now, in the future, only registered products under this scheme can be sold in the market. And also it is for the retailers' convenience so that they can identify the products easily. So that's why we are proposing to add a label. So is that a QR code specifically for that individual products or for the type of products? That is for the general category of the products. We propose to make the QR code simple with several alphabets. Understood. So in the future, for PRS, for vehicle tires and EV batteries, these are related to my constituencies as well. So for many years in Legislative, my stance on eco-friendliness has been the same. Everything is about cost and money. If the consumers are willing, then we can introduce these schemes. Well, in the past, the government has rushed through these PRS. I've been telling the government, if you tell the consumers that they have to pay for their share, the story would be very different. Everyone subscribes to the idea of eco-friendliness, but if you are asking them to pay, that will be a whole different story. So for the PRS for plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, I was there in those meetings between you and the trades. The additional cost is real. The additional 10 cents or 20 cents of cost, who will pay for it? Someone has to pay after all. And those would be the consumers. If you let the markets to take the rein, the producers will have to pay extra to engage a contractor to collect the bottles for them. The producers have no way to do that on their own. Naturally, they would have to hire someone else to collect the plastic bottles for them. And then the contractors will have to pay for manpower to collect the plastic bottles. So naturally, the producers will not be the one paying. The consumers would be. So in the end, the prices of the beverages would be higher. The prices will naturally go up. Now the recovery rate is 30% for the first phase. If I can't comply with the recovery rate, there will be a punishment. I will have to pay a levy. Then will I pay from my own pocket? Of course not. I will transfer it to the consumers. So I don't see how it would add to the cost of the trade, but rather the consumers will end up paying. It's just that they don't know yet. Now this is my 9th year in the Legislative. Now when the government was introducing the recycling schemes for electrical appliances and so on, it's just a matter of money. But now the situation is different. We now have electronic commerce, e-commerce. They are our competitors. Now, during weekends and holidays, many people are spending their money in Shenzhen. We have become less and less competitive. Now, for the recycling schemes for electrical appliances, we are paying the tax for eco-friendliness. In the mainland, however, they have quality products which are sold at a very cheap price, and they have very low tax. Local electrical appliances manufacturers or retailers cannot compete with them, and you are still imposing yet more burden on them. Now, the story of our retailing sector is changing rapidly. The landscape is very different now. The new laws you are introducing have not considered cross-boundary e-commerce and its competition. Allow me to speak a few words more. This is the core issue. It's about the business environments in Hong Kong. You're asking the public to pay a steep price. Now, in the future, since the QR codes on the bottles are not bound to that bottle, then producers in the mainland can also print this QR code on their products. Now, if you purchase the beverages in bulk, you can buy a pack of it with $10, and that will outcompete our local retailers. You are saying that it does not add to our operational cost, but I think that is not true, especially considering our business environment. So these are your views, but I will give the administration some time to respond to your views concerning the additional costs and the competition from cross-boundary e-commerce. Thank you. We understand Mr. Peter Shield's concerns. In fact, we have met with Mr. Peter Shield and the trade for many times. That's why in my opening remarks, I've said that we are accurately aware of the potential impacts of PRS on the trade, considering the business environments at present. We need to proceed prudently. Now, for plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, we have been discussing the PRS with the trade for a long time. The trade generally supports the idea of PRS for these two products. But the trade has raised concerns over the additional costs and the business environments. That's why they ask us to be prudent and be progressive in implementing this scheme. That's why we will do it step by step. We will keep the scope controllable, and we will limit the scope to an extent that is acceptable by the trade. We don't want to impose additional burden on the trade. What about e-commerce? Now, about the QR code, that would be a QR code for the type of products. Mr. Peter Shield asked whether there would be each product would have to be registered. Well, there will be a barcode for each individual product to be stored in our central depository. So each product sold in Hong Kong will have to be registered with the EPD. So there will be no concern of products produced outside Hong Kong getting a barcode. Ms. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to follow up on Mr. Peter Shield's questions about the code and the label. Now, for major producers like Coca-Cola, they have their own recovering schemes. However, for smaller shops, like those shops selling soya milk or herbal tea, they will also sell their products in plastic bottles. But actually, they use lots of plastic bottles in their daily operation as well. So will the cost for the QR code be borne by these small businesses? They will also have to register with you and apply for the code. Second, in the past, many of the waste plastic bottles would be shipped to the mainland for recycling. 8 years ago, some waste from outside Hong Kong were transshipped to the mainland via Hong Kong. Now, 8 years on, in the mainland, there is a mature recycling market. At present, if we want to ship plastic waste to the mainland, we need to process the plastic bottles and make them into plastic beads before they can be shipped to the mainland. Now, the technology in the mainland is very advanced. They can use these plastic waste to make filaments for clothing. So like Dr. Dick asked, can we do better in terms of encouraging growth in the downstream sectors? Can we have our local recyclers who have the technologies to recycle those waste collected through Greennet community and make them into other products? Now, exporting these waste to the mainland for processing is expensive because we need to pay a tax. So can we have our own recycling business in Hong Kong? Now, for plastic and plastic bags, now with the latest technology, they can be decomposed in 2 weeks' time if it is a humid region. Even in arid region, they can be decomposed in 3 weeks' time. But we don't see any support from the governments to encourage the sector to adopt these technologies. Now, everyone has a share in protecting the environment, the government as well. We are facing extreme climate events globally. So I hope the governments can conduct a research on how we can better utilize the technologies. Deputy Secretary, I will take the second and the third questions, and I will defer the question about the label to the Assistant Director. Indeed, there is room for closer collaboration with the mainland counterparts concerning making use of the recyclables. So we have been discussing the concept of zero waste GBA with the mainland authorities. Several meetings have been held, and we have made some visits to the recycling facilities in the mainland. The idea is to reach a consensus among the GBA cities that these recyclables are valuable. The country attaches a lot of importance to these resources. So talks are in progress. We are trying to find a market for these recyclables in Hong Kong. We seek to combine these strengths on both sides, that is, the technologies in the mainland and the financial markets in Hong Kong. We are trying to make this zero waste GBA happen.
Well, under the PRS, we believe that for the Chinese herbal tea shops and soya milk shops, since they are filling the bottles at the point, then they do not need to comply with our scheme. Well, how about for products that are not easily biodegradable? How do we handle that? Well, Deputy Director, well, we have to continue monitoring the different methods for some products that deem themselves to be biodegradable, well, under a non-oxidant environment in some of the anaerobic area, then it may not be easily biodegradable. But as technology advances by the day, we would continue to monitor the situation. Well, thank you. Well, because the mainland has been using this method for many years, and we can see that we are using such kind of plastics in the supermarket, and these are actually manufactured in the Greater Bay Area. Perhaps we could also consider these methods as well. Thank you. Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Well, when we passed the PRS many years ago, we were not able to roll out this comprehensively, and we had to launch this step by step as we had to help the public adapt to this lifestyle. And we, of course, must also shoulder responsibility in product recycling. Well, it's been a few years since then, and we were able to roll out schemes for glass bottles, and able to take out plastic utensils in for takeout use. Now, for this bill, we are talking about a common legislative framework for products. Are you saying that in future all other products would go under this common legislative framework? I am a bit confused about this, because this framework would seem quite broad. It covers plastic beverage containers, beverage cartons, EV batteries, vehicle tires, etc. I am not quite clear what exactly we are going for under this bill. Deputy Director. Oh, thank you. I'm sure Dr. Low is very familiar with it because he have participated in many such bills. Well, CAP 603, as you can see, is very thick. Every time we introduce a new PRS, we would list out the responsibilities for all stakeholders, and then list out all the scheme details every single time. And it takes time to do that. It would take many years for out to roll out one scheme. Coming up, we would adopt a market-led approach. As for a market-led approach, the scheme operators, the suppliers, the different stakeholders would then bear their own responsibilities, such as registration, retail responsibilities, etc. All these would then be set out under one legislative framework, which is to say, in future, when we roll out more producer responsibility schemes, we do not need to list out all the details again every time. Under this one common legislative framework, those elements would be applicable to the products listed out under the annex. And in future, we can just add on products to the appendix or annex. Let's say some of the regulations would fall under plastic containers. Then we could list out the details and then we would be able to use a subsidiary legislation for that certain product. Once this legislative framework is set, then we'll be able to roll this out more expeditiously. Chairman, I understand that we are trying to put many of the common points under one legislative framework. But how about for the specific products under this one framework? There are many details that differ from each other because each material goes through a different recycling process. Consumers will need to understand how they could recycle it. I'm not objecting to the way. I just want to see whether upcoming we would need to work on another bill on other recyclable products. Deputy Director, Dr. Low is correct. Well, once we come up with a common legislative framework, we wouldn't need to repeat all these in the new bills. Well, let's say for beverage cartons, or there may be some recycling process that differ from other products, and we just need to fill in some details specific to each product under a subsidiary legislation. And we would use the subsidiary legislation as a way for us to roll out the schemes more quickly. Well, if I understand it correctly, we are adopting the market-led approach for all products under one umbrella of the common legislative framework, but then for specific product issues, then that would go under a subsidiary legislation. I just want to make this clear. I'm sure it's not only me. Some other members may also be confused because we talk about beverage containers and beverage cartons, but some members may think that this is the whole bill and not understand that for other products we would still need to work on subsidiary legislation. All right, thank you. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. In the past, the government-led approach was not very effective. I have said this many times that I think more products are thrown out than recycled. Well, we use a lot of plastic containers, and the cost is borne by consumers. Now, the government finally understands that a market-led approach is much better, and are looking into working with stakeholders such as scheme operators and suppliers. Well, this is something we must take forward. Otherwise, the cost would still be borne by taxpayers. There are a few points I'd like to raise. The administration said that under the new market-led approach, it could help us enhance the recycling chain. We hope that more research could be done on the recyclable use of such products and not only export these materials. We have seen issues coming up during the closing of the borders. and that would bring problems, as that would be a lot of backlog of such products. How can we make sure that there will not be a backlog of such recyclable products in Hong Kong? I'm also concerned with what we discussed in the panel before, like how we handle products taken in through the green at community. And these would mostly be manned by cleaning operators, and then they could sell the products to scheme operators for recycling. I don't think that would work, because ultimately public funding has been spent and actually taxpayers are paying for it. We want a market-led approach to be real market-led approach, that the cost will be borne by the scheme operators. The cleaning operators, they're much like the intermediaries here, seem to be the one making profit here, because they could then make a profit from selling those recyclable products to the scheme operators. Deputy Director. Whether it be the downstream process capacity or how these products would be used, we do believe it is very important to look into the whole process. We want to make sure that there would be an outlet for downstream processing before we roll out the scheme. We have to ensure that there is a smooth flow. You're concerned with the role of green and community for beverage containers and beverage cartons. When we adopt a market-led approach, the scheme operators or the suppliers, they will need to reach a certain recyclable target, that there must be a certain recovery target. So there must be a refund or a rebate for the recyclable product. We see currently that high-value products such as aluminum bottles, you wouldn't see this at green at community because there is not a high refund. For glass containers, you will see that the market-led approach would actually provide a higher incentive to the consumer. I'm sure you can imagine that when there is a higher incentive elsewhere, then such products would not go through green at community. Well, there are many different green at community spots for those who want to make a profit, or they might want to work together with green at community to install such glass container recycling vending machines. They could also have the aluminum bottles sold there, and then to sell it off to the downstream operators. The money earned could actually help us reduce the cost at greener community. And that could lower the burden of taxpayers. Under a market-led approach, greener community would not become a point in which the public would go to earn money through recycling.
Chairman, greener communities are located at convenient locations for the public. So I don't believe that in the future the flow of recyclables will change because of your schemes. Some collectors may procure the recyclables at green community and then sell them at a market price. So we need to be aware of that situation in the future. Ms. Judy Chan. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I state my support for the PRS. For environmental protection efforts to succeed, we need all hands on deck. That's the same everywhere. So now we are involving the manufacturers and producers in the efforts. This is something new. We support it, but we understand the business environment is challenging, so it is understandable that the producers have their concerns. So after establishing the common legislative framework, when you formulate the details of the PRS, the government must have sufficient discussion with the producers. Now, I'm glad to hear that those small practices like herbal tea shops and soya milk shop, they will be exempted. Now, but how about if they are also recycling the bottles? What will the arrangements be like? Now, about the common legislative framework in the bill. My main concern is how well will the public adapt to this. Now, when we began charging consumers a fee for the plastic bag since 2009, when we encouraged the public to bring their own shopping bag, I think the government has done its best. Still, we cannot change the behavior of everyone in Hong Kong. So under the common legislative framework, maybe we need to review the level of rebate regularly. Now we are setting the rebate as 10 cents initially, but we may need a KPI that by a certain time in the future, we need to adjust the rebate upwards. That should be made a target. Finally, this point has been mentioned by other members as well. We need a comprehensive ecosystem. Circular is a key word. We need a comprehensive circular ecosystem in recycling. Now, after recovering the beverage cartons and the plastic beverage containers, what new products can they be made into? If new products can be made from these recyclables, this will generate profits, and then the profits can encourage the producers to recover even more waste. This should be the concepts that we are pursuing. Thank you. Deputy Secretary or Deputy Director. Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Chan mentioned the current business environment. As I've said, we are aware of the situation and we are being very prudent. However, we are encouraged by our discussion with the trade. None of the stakeholders we talked to objected to our proposal. Many stakeholders have written to us or even made a statement on newspaper that they supported our move. Still, we will be very prudent and be progressive with the implementation. So as mentioned by Ms. Judy Chan, we will enhance the recovery targets and the KPIs gradually. And also we will provide for a preparatory period and a transitional period. During the preparatory period, for the stakeholders like producers, collectors, and recyclers, we will give them time to get their operation ready. And then there would be an adaptational period. The first phase is 30% recovery rate and 10% rebate. We will give the trade some time to see if they encounter any difficulties in the period. Only after that will we enter into the official commencement of the regimes. Now about the ecosystems, Ms. Judy Chan is right. We must provide a wide enough outlet for the recyclables. And the transformation should bring about more values to the recyclables. Now, if the profit is high, then the cost for recovery would be lower because with a lucrative enough market, more collectors will be collecting the waste and the recovery cost would be reduced. Now, if a strong ecosystem can be established in the GBA, then we can further compress the collection cost. Mr. Andrew Lam, thank you, Chairman. I have 3 points to make. Now, with the legislative amendments and with the common legislative framework in place, there can be a lot of benefits. Now, initially, 5 products will be regulated, but they are of very different natures. So we must pay attention to the compatibility of the wordings used in the common legislative framework. Now, I believe that more products will be included in the PRS, including styrofoam boxes. Now, with the advancements in technologies, there are more and more composite materials. So in terms of the usage of new materials in packaging and as containers, the EPD must keep up with the trend. Let me give you an example. You mentioned vehicle tires. In the foreseeable future, that may not apply anymore. It seems that we are assuming that vehicle tires must be made from rubber or plastic. So you need to pay attention to these wordings. Why not take this opportunity to define the word more clearly? I understand that realistically we need to provide for some exemptions in the bill. Now we have had lengthy discussion on recycling of glass beverage bottles. Now, I won't say that cross-boundary trade is a loophole, but indeed there is a gap. Now, I asked the government for figures about the situation, but the government doesn't keep these figures. This is about the flow of the market and the products. From a consumer's point of view and in terms of the outlets of recycling, we need these figures. Without these statistics, the monitoring regime cannot reach deep enough into the downstream segments. So I hope the government can make some efforts to collect the data of cross-boundary flow of the recyclables. Now about the PRS. Let's be pragmatic. On the market-led approach, producer responsibility scheme also means consumers' responsibility schemes. Now, the bottom line is when there is profits to be made, we can enhance the recycling value chain. That's not a bad thing in itself. But also, from a realistic point of view, as other members said, we do have recycling markets locally, but we still lack an outlet for the products. For many years, we have been talking about using the GBA as an outlet for our recyclables. But these were just talks. There were still no real actions taken to build a circular market in the GBA for recyclables. So on one hand, if we are only focusing on the upper segments but not the outlets and the downstream segments, it will still be ineffective. Deputy Director, thank you, Mr. Andrew Lam, for your views. Your suggestions are good. Now, when we are formulating the common legislative framework, we are aware that we need to be as wide-catching as possible. We have tried to include all the common factors among various products in the legislative framework. For product-specific details, they will be provided for in the subsidiary legislation. Now, for styrofoam boxes and composition materials mentioned by Mr. Andrew Lam, as I said, in deciding the merits of a PRS for a certain product, one consideration is the downstream outlets for the products and whether the recovery process is cost-effective. If there is not a market for the products, then all the recyclables collected will go to waste. Now, for styrofoam boxes, it is recoverable, but the recovery cost is high. So for styrofoam, we encourage reusing styrofoam. There are recyclers collecting the styrofoam boxes from wet markets and have them shipped to the mainland for reuse. For composite materials, it is a complicated process, and we don't have any downstream recyclers for composite materials in Hong Kong, but we will pay attention to the developments of the market. In terms of cross-boundary statistics, now for those imported into Hong Kong through official channels or parallel channels, For those distributed in Hong Kong, when distributors are involved locally, they are also covered under the PRS. On an individual level, however, the law does not cover individual visitors and consumers. So we will keep monitoring the situation and monitor the impact on the local recycling trade.
如果冇嘅話，就下位議員。
Thank you. Mr. Rincon. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 points I'd like to raise first. Well, this round, we're actually establishing a common legislative framework. I see that we are rolling out the producer responsibility scheme as we did before, but this time we are working on a common legislative framework. To me, this is actually quite a slow process because after we have amended this bill, there will still be other regulations on specific products. My question is on some of the specific products. Would there actually be a timetable for that? I am just concerned that after amending the bill, this time we would still need to work on specific products for a long period of time, thus delaying it further. Some members have raised that we need a better ecological system for recycling. We also need a change of mindset. Consumers have actually changed their mindset over the years. I hope that the government will come up with a clear timetable and to leverage on consumers' change of mindset to really make this work. Under the bill, in the annual report for registered scheme operators, when they do not meet a certain designated number, then they will not need to comply with the scheme. What is the definition of designated volume? I also see that suppliers need to register at the moment, and you would also list out and impose certain criteria on suppliers. Would it be very difficult for suppliers to comply with these conditions because this is only a general framework and we do not know the details on that? I'll also like to follow up on what Mr. Chiu Ka-fai said. I agree with his point, especially on cross-border consumption. Well, this is a fact nowadays. Well, let's not just talk about us going to the mainland. Well, for other products that are brought elsewhere, they are not included under the bill. Am I correct? Deputy Director, let me answer part of the questions and then I will defer to the Assistant Director. On the timetable, our main goal right now is first to approve the common legislative framework, and then on the most popular products, on beverage containers, beverage cartons, and vehicle tires, we are working on these simultaneously. We are in close contact with the sector in fine-tuning the details. That takes a lot of work, but once the common legislative framework is established, we will be able to roll out the specific products gradually. We must be prudent, and it must be an approach that can be shouldered by the operators. I agree that yes, we do need an ecological system and at the same time a change of mindset. These are equally important. We will continue to educate the public. In recent years, we have seen effectiveness. In the past 3 years, we have seen a continuously increasing rate of recovery and a reduction in landfill. I think that we can gradually see a recycling culture in Hong Kong. And for the other questions, let me defer to the Assistant Director. The annual audit and the annual report would be waived for some of the smaller operators. We would continue and so they would not need to submit the periodic returns. But then on to specifically the target on the beverage cartons and vehicle tires, we're still working on it, and then we would roll this out in subsidiary legislation later on. All right. If there are no other members who would like to ask questions, I would ask the last question. I support the establishment of a common legislative framework. However, I also understand the economic difficulties. Any increase in cost would have an impact on the market. A 10-cent refund could not count as an overall cost because a cost would also include transport. Have you calculated the actual cost? Would there actually have a market impact, and would the cost actually be shifted to consumers? There are registered suppliers and registered scheme operators for this framework. Could suppliers, once registered, also become registered scheme operators? Or would they only need to comply with a certain recovery target? There are many different criteria for operators. In future, would you require them to only go to registered scheme operators, or can they just hand this over to other operators? Must the products actually be dealt with by registered operators? Let's say for plastic containers, the refund may not be very attractive, and they might increase it to 50 cents or $1. The cost would then be transferred to the consumers, and if they find it not feasible, could they then actually change it back to the deposit method? 4 questions. Assistant Director, please. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for your questions. We are very concerned with the long-term cost. We try our best to lower the cost. We have discussed this with potential scheme operators. As long as they are able to achieve a certain target, then they would actually not find it too difficult in the cost. A 10 even a 10-cent refund may not actually bring too high a cost to the operators. We have tested this out with the vending machines, and actually the costs for these two are similar. We believe that this is feasible. We have also discussed with the sector that a refund mechanism would be more attractive and have a better result than using a vending recyclable machine. Well, what if after rolling the refund mechanism for a period of time and they find it not feasible, could they actually change back to the deposit mechanism? Well, Chairman, we say that there should at least be a 10-cent refund. Well, but then we only look at the recovery rate as long as, well, we just say that the minimum refund would be a 10-cent refund, but then we do not have a set method in how you recycle the product. All right. Well, for the registered suppliers, can they actually be the registered scheme operators as well? And do you actually have to hand over the products to registered operators? Well, registered suppliers can arrange for their own recycling or to work with a registered scheme operators. There is a flexibility. They just have to deliver these products to the downstream sector. And these must be registered as well. All right, second round. There are 3 members who have a second round of questions. First, Mr. Chen Siu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to follow up on a couple of questions. First, on plastic beverage containers and small operators. Well, during the public consultation, the administration has organized about 190 consultations, and the sector in general do not object to 5 regulated products going under the common legislative framework. But then there are some small operators that are a bit concerned. This time round, you're not working on the specific details. You're just promoting a common legislative framework. Well, I see on paragraph 15 that you would continue to support resources recovery, and you would consider to waive some of the small operators in submitting periodic returns and annual audit. So are these the only 2 waivers for the small operators? Are there other ways in which you can alleviate their concerns? Another question is one I'm very concerned with, which is the example on Chinese herbal tea shops or soya milk shops. Usually, when they would provide plastic bottles for these beverages, and they actually have an exemption. Well, let's say a shop sells a certain brand of Coke. It has nothing to do with a bottle. You just have to regulate the beverage shop. So now you're saying that you are exempting the upstream of the soya milk and Chinese herbal tea shops. I just want you to be very careful in what you do, because you are just exempting some of the smaller operators. So that's one question. And I have another question on what another member has raised. You are thinking of adopting this framework for beverage containers, beverage cartons, etc. And the next step, you would be working on vehicle tires. I know that the cost of that is high. Well, just now we talked about the composite materials. It's too complicated for the general public to understand. Many members of the public are concerned with the bottles that they use at home. For example, shampoo bottles. These are plastic bottles. They want to recycle them as well. They may take them to Greenet community as they would take these bottles, but then it's not under the bill this time. We are also concerned with over-packaging of products. In future, would you also regulate over-packaging of products? And you can also just use a subsidiary legislation to handle this in the future.
Deputy Director, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chan, for your further questions. For smaller producers, we have listened carefully to their concerns. So in terms of the administrative cost, for example, the submission of the producer responsibility plan and also the audit report, on their request, we can waive them. We can exempt them from these responsibilities. That would greatly reduce the administrative cost on small businesses. For herbal tea shops, the exemption is like this. For beverages being filled into the bottles on site, these types of beverages are exempted. If herbal tea shops or soya milk shops are selling prepared beverages, they are not exempted. We are only exempting those beverages filled into bottles on site. I seek a clarification here. As I've said, for shops selling beverages made by larger brands, if their sizes are smaller than a certain, if the shop area is smaller than a certain size, they will be exempted from the requirement. Now, if herbal tea shops or soya milk shops are selling the beverages on site, still they have to procure their bottles somewhere. If the plastic beverage containers they are using are exempted, that would not be reasonable, because when they procure the bottles, the upstream producers should have complied with your requirements and charged the 10 cents rebate. Is that right? Now, the law only regulates plastic beverage containers with beverage inside them. For plastic bottles containing a beverage, they would be in scope. Concerning other kinds of bottles mentioned by Mr. Chan, shampoo bottles or soy sauce bottles and so on, those plastic bottles can be recycled at Greenet community. When including various products in the scope under the PRS, we consider a number of factors that include whether the readiness is sufficient in the trade. So we seek to regulate plastic beverage containers because we think that the market is already mature. A great challenge to including more products in the scope is that there are simply too many types of products on the market. It takes time. So may I ask supplementary information from the administration after the meeting? That is the amount of plastic beverage containers compared with the number of plastic bottles for holding shampoo and other household products. What is the share of both types of bottles? Ms. Carmen Can? Actually, I have submitted a written question to the Legislative on a similar topic. So I also draw your attention to the administration's reply. Now, this bill we are scrutinizing is a Miscellaneous Amendments bill. So multiple pieces of legislations will be amended that include apparel, CAP 603 Products Eco-Responsibility Ordinance, and CAP 354 Waste Disposal Ordinance. I very much agree with other members who said that we need to take a comprehensive consideration of the entire value chain. Especially, there is nothing on Schedule 12 at present. I know you want to roll out the measures whenever they are ready, but in Annex B of the paper, you also mentioned your plan to extend the scope to other products, for example, 30% for plastic bottles and 10% for beverage cartons. Now, since you have set the targets already, we would need to keep you to task. Now, when we are approving the common legislation framework, there is nothing yet on the Schedule 12. So we need some reassurances from the government that you will see it through. So how can we do that? I think we need to consider how we can develop the ecosystem further. For example, the relationship with the green as community. $500 million have been spent on running the 6 green as community shops and the numerous collection points. So as mentioned by Mr. Kwok Wai-keung, will the producer compete with the green as community for recyclables? Now, actually, the property management sector is well positioned at collecting the recyclables because there is always a property management downstairs of a home. Now, according to CAP 603, the property management sector is exempted from the campaign, and they are just involved by way of a charter. So we are excluding the most relevant players in this effort. Now, for larger shops with a size larger than 400 meters square, they are in scope. So will businesses exploit this loophole by renting smaller shops? So there are two issues. You are excluding the property management sector, and also you are setting the threshold too high by making shops larger than 400 square meter in scope. Now, there are many retail points in MTR stations, but they are usually smaller than 400 square meters in size. These shops are quite small. So we need to consider the number of collection points for recyclables in the market. Now, we are only scrutinizing the common legislative framework today, but that's better than nothing. We will have a chance to scrutinize the subsidiary legislation later. But I wonder whether they will be scrutinized by Legislative via positive or negative vetting in the future. Now, under the plastic shopping bag charging scheme, With the bill, you will allow for digital payment methods for the charge, including FPS. Now, there are more than 1,060 accounts registered under FPS. So I asked this question in my written question as well. With the fiscal position we are in, we need to create more revenue streams. So why not redirect the charges charged under the charging scheme to the governments directly? That would increase the revenue of the government. Now, in year 2015, at that time, the businesses were asked to pay the governments directly. Now, please give the member a succinct reply. Thank you. Concerning Schedule 12, there is nothing on the schedule yet. Now, from a law drafting point of view, before the subsidiary legislation has come into place, we should keep the schedule empty. But when the subsidiary legislation has been made, then we will fill out the schedule gradually. Now, in the paper, we have set out our scheme to include various items in the schedule. Now, concerning the recycling network, especially for household wastes, now we have a separate and collect scheme for waste in housing estates. There are recycling facilities in place in housing estates. So even without legislation, many housing estates already have collection points. So we contemplated involving the property management sector when we were debating over the municipal solid waste charging scheme. Now, the coverage of recycling facilities in housing estates is already wide enough. Now, I don't think the government has made a thorough thought of it, because you are not asking the property management sector to offer a rebate to the households. You're asking the businesses to offer a rebate, but you are not asking the property management sector to do so. So it's not fair. So the household residents would find recycling their recyclables downstairs most convenient, but you are not giving them a rebate. Deputy Director. Now, if producers would like to install reverse vending machines in a certain housing estate, they can have a negotiation with the manager of the property. Now, so far, we propose that for larger shops with a size of 400 meter squares area, there will be a statutory requirement to offer a collection point with rebates offered. Now, Ms. Khan mentioned about subsidiary legislation. According to her proposal, it would be a negative vetting process for maximum speed and efficiency. Now, about MSW charging or plastic shopping bag charging, we are simply making available a digital payment method. We have no plan to ask the businesses to hand over the fees charged to the government. The idea is to discourage the use of plastic bags. Sorry, correction. I'm not saying MSW is the plastic bag charging scheme. We want to discourage the use of plastic bags.
就
Last, Mr. Siu Ka-fai. Well, you'll leave me a bit of time for other business. Well, give me 5 minutes, please, because our meeting ends at 10:30. All right. I'd like to ask the EPD. Your concept is hoping that the producer would ask the scheme operators and suppliers to actually recycle and to reach a recovery rate of 30% and 10% for beverage containers and beverage cartons, etc. And if they're not able to reach a recovery target, then there will be a penalty. Otherwise, it will be ineffective. Am I correct? And we talked about a sort of a code for the products. How are you going to ensure that the scheme operators actually reach the 30% recovery rate? Well, do all the recovered products have the specified QR code? Otherwise, those will not count. Thank you, Mr. Xiu. We would require a periodic return to the EPD from this scheme operator, because for registered scheme operators, we would require them to submit this return for our review. The EPD would also make random checks and inspections to ensure that the scheme operators comply with our targets. Third, when they recover products that do not have the specified code, they would not count as part of the recovery target. Therefore, the periodic return and the random checks would ensure that they comply with our guidelines. Well, the periodic return would not be effective at all, because for sure they would not tell you what kind of products they have recovered, and therefore you can only know about that when you check it yourself. So how frequent would you make such visits? Once a month? Once a year? Well, so are you going to check before the products are compressed or after they are compressed? Well, for the 500 milliliter containers, how many containers would there be in 1 ton? Deputy Director or Assistant Director. Well, of course, the periodic return would be very important. There would also be a centralized registration system. They may collect the bottles via vending machines. We will have the data. They might also recover it by weight, and we would base this on the periodic return. And for the random check, we would do it at least once a year. And depending on the recovery quality, we might make extra visits. Well, let me repeat my question. Assistant Director, you are saying that products without QR codes would not be counted. Some operators, in order to comply with your targets, might collect products from elsewhere and then to count those as well. That is the reason why you need the QR code. How do you know whether the recovered bottles have the label or not? You have to monitor compliance. You're just saying that you're going to make a random check once a year. Are you checking a load of plastic bottles all laid out, or would they say that there is not enough room for storage and therefore they have already compressed the load? Because they usually compress the products before delivering them elsewhere. So how are you going to check it? And why is it only once a year? Well, Assistant Director, how are you going to identify the products? And how are you going to make the checks? Well, for 1 ton of plastic containers, how many are you actually talking about? Well, we say that we would make the visit at least once a year, and then we would add in more visits in accordance with need. And when we make these random investigations, we would open up the bags to check the bottles. So we check the bottles before they are compressed. All right, Chairman, colleagues. Or at least you should come up with a better process. You don't know where the containers come from. Even if you go check and open up a bag to check the bottles, have you thought through the process? When you open up the bag, how many bottles do you think there would be in a bag? Assistant Director. Oh, Deputy Director. Well, first of all, the operator must submit a periodic return and they would then check. And there should be an audit. What sort of audit? Who does the audit? Well, the operator can appoint an independent auditor to conduct an audit. So who's in charge of the auditing? Would that be an independent auditor doing that? Yes. And so they would need to provide an annual audit to the EPD. So how frequent would they conduct the audit? The annual audit that would be done once a year. So an auditor must prove that those are regulated products. So you request the auditor firm to not only look at the volume, you also need them to check whether they are labeled products, whether they are products with the QR code. So do you request them to see a weekly sample, a daily sample, or a monthly sample? So each quarter or each half year, the auditor must provide us a return. The auditor would then, based on the periodic return, check whether the figures are correct, because we want a report on labeled and regulated products. The auditor would check the two reports to see whether they comply. We would conduct an annual random investigation. It would be a large-scale investigation and to look at the recycling process of the registered operator. Well, I haven't finished up with my question. As Ms. Carmen said, when you come up with a policy, it must be a comprehensive policy. It should not be only sort of like a half policy. Otherwise, based on your current a proposal. I don't think how you're going to handle this in the future. Well, I don't know how you're going to do that. I'm going to ask my question at the next meeting. Let me supplement, Chairman. Mr. Xiu has raised a very good question. As I said, there are a lot of details that need to be ironed out for each regulated product. We are still in discussion on many of these details. So we are going to collect all your views and all the views from the sector and then enhance them as we see fit. Perhaps you can provide a written response to Mr. Xiu's question. Dr. Loy Kwok. Chairman, from this 2-hour discussion, it gives rise to concern on my earlier question. We are now formulating a common legislative framework for products to be regulated in the future. But there are many details within each product, and we should not evade from discussing those. Going forward, this would be very complicated. Each product is different. Even with a common framework, you still need to fine-tune many specific details. I don't know whether there is too much help in formulating a common legislative framework. But as I've joined this committee, of course, I will do my best to work on it together. Well, what we need to do now is to first draw up the common legislative framework so that for other products we'll be able to adopt it through negative vetting. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, please be quick. I just want to say that there are a lot of concerns. I understand all the concerns by members. I hope that the administration can clarify and to allay some of our concerns. Styrofoam, vehicle tires, all these products coming up. Can the common legislative framework be adopted directly onto these products? What makes the administration believe that the auditor is conducting an accurate audit? So the auditor, of course, will need to sign an official document. For vehicle tires, for batteries, can we actually just adopt the entire framework onto these products in the future? You have to explain this to us. I hope that the administration can clarify many of these points, how this framework can be applicable to other products, and to give us some examples. Well, the administration can provide us with a written response and then clarify this further at our next meeting. Mr. Xiu, do you want to follow up? Would you actually extend the meeting by 15 minutes? Well, I have to deal with other things. Well, if you can extend the meeting by 15 minutes, I can ask another question. All right, I'll do that. For the negative vetting, and also on what Dr. Low said, we're looking into first approving the framework. But there are many questions arising from this common legislative framework. We are actually giving the responsibility to the independent auditor. The auditor will be responsible for checking the bottles, whether the bottles have QR code. Well, the audit firm would only check the volume of products. they're not going to check which bottles carry the QR code. Do you know how much it costs to have an audit firm to check these bottles one by one? According to my understanding, their work is not to check the QR code or how many bottles carry the QR code. If you do that, I don't know how large the cost would be. And then this cost would then be shifted over to the consumers, or perhaps no audit firm would be willing to do that. And then if you're only going to conduct an audit once a year, this is really ridiculous. There are many, many details that I want to also discuss with you at the next meeting.
You have expressed your views. So since we are going to resume policy debate on the next occasion, I will stop here. The next item, invitation or public submission. Do members think we need to invite public submissions from the public? Yes, that is decided. The last item. In the next meeting, we will continue to discuss the policy side of the bill. If that can be completed next time, we will move on to clause-by-clause scrutiny. I will ask the governments to be prepared. So since we have extended the meeting by 15 minutes, I will ask you as well. Will we vet the Chinese version of the bill? Yes. Then AOB, any proposed discussion item? Mr. Peter Shiu? Now about negative vetting, I have some major views about that. Since there are so many details, it would be a big issue if we find the law unenforceable after the subsidiary legislation is made. In particular, when it comes to environmental protection, there are lots of details and we need to sort them all out before the subsidiary legislation are made. Thank you. For the next meeting, we will have to check the availability of rooms with the Secretariat, and you will be informed of the arrangements later. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.